Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most astonishing true stories in aviation history. A tale of survival against all odds, a testament to human ingenuity, and a flight that became known as the Gimli glider. Grab your seats because this journey is going to take your breath away. Our story begins on a calm summer day, July 23, 1983. Air Canada Flight 143, a brand new Boeing 767, is preparing for a routine flight from Montreal to Edmonton. In the cockpit are Captain Bob Pearson, a seasoned pilot with over 15,000 flight hours, and First Officer Maurice Quintel. The cabin crew is ready, the passengers are boarding, and everything seems perfectly normal. But a hidden error, a simple miscalculation, was about to turn this ordinary flight into an extraordinary fight for survival. You see, Canada was in the middle of switching from the imperial system to the metric system. The new Boeing 767 was one of the first aircraft with a fully digital cockpit and a metric-based fuel management system. On this particular day, the plane's fuel quantity indication system was not working. As a backup, the ground crew had to manually calculate the fuel needed using dipsticks. Here's where the critical mistake happened. They calculated the fuel in pounds, as they always had, but entered the number as if it were kilograms. A pound is less than half a kilogram. The result? Flight 143 took off with less than half the fuel it needed to reach Edmonton. No one had any idea. The first leg of the journey was uneventful. Planes soared through the clear skies, crossing over Ontario. But as they cruised at 41,000 feet over Red Lake, the cockpit was suddenly pierced by a chilling sound. Beep, beep, beep. A warning light flashed. Low fuel pressure on the left side. Captain Pearson and First Officer Quintel were confused. The computer said there was plenty of fuel. They thought it must be a faulty fuel pump and switched it off. The problem seemed to solve itself. But then, a few minutes later, another alarm. This time, for the right engine. A terrifying realization began to dawn on them. This wasn't a faulty pump. They were running out of fuel. Just moments later, the left engine flamed out. The massive Boeing 767, weighing over 130 tons, was now flying on one engine. Captain Pearson immediately began procedures for a one-engine-out descent, aiming for the nearest major airport, Winnipeg. First Officer Quintel frantically tried to contact air traffic control. But as the plane lost power, the situation escalated dramatically. The second engine sputtered and died. And then an eerie, deafening silence fell over the cockpit. The engines were gone. At 41,000 feet, Flight 143 had become a giant, powerless glider. The modern, sophisticated cockpit went dark. Most of the instruments were dead, were flying blind. In this moment of absolute crisis, a small propeller-driven device called the Ram Air Turbine, or RAT, automatically deployed. It was a tiny emergency generator, powered by the wind rushing past the aircraft, providing just enough hydraulic pressure for the pilots to maintain some basic control of the plane. It was their only lifeline. First Officer Quintel, using his knowledge of the area, remembered a small, decommissioned Air Force base in a town called Gimli. It wasn't on any of their commercial charts, but it was their only hope. He frantically calculated their rate of descent. They were falling out of the sky at over 2,000 feet per minute. The question was, could they even make it to Gimli? Captain Pearson, meanwhile, was drawing on a completely different set of skills. He was an experienced glider pilot. Who would have thought that a hobby would become the key to saving 69 lives? Flying a 132-ton commercial jetliner like a glider was something no one had ever trained for. It was unheard of. He had to manually control the descent, balancing speed and altitude to stretch their glide as far as possible. He knew he had only one chance to land. There would be no go-arounds, no second attempts. As they approached Gimli, a new shock awaited them. The old Royal Canadian Air Force Base wasn't abandoned. It had been converted into a community drag racing strip. On that very day, it was hosting a family day event for a local car club. The runway was covered with race cars, families having picnics and kids on bicycles. The pilots, descending without engine power and limited communication, had no way of knowing this. To the people on the ground, the sight of a massive, silent, Boeing 767 descending directly towards them must have been terrifyingly surreal. Captain Pearson realized he was coming in too high and too fast. A normal landing was impossible. He had to perform a maneuver that is difficult even with full power: a forward slip. This involves banking the aircraft in one direction while using the rudder to yaw in the opposite direction. It's a technique used by glider pilots to rapidly lose altitude without gaining too much airspeed. To do this in a massive jetliner was an act of pure instinctual airmanship. It was a breathtaking gamble. The aircraft's landing gear dropped, held in place only by gravity, but the nose gear didn't lock. As the main wheels touched down on the racetrack, sparks flew. The tires screeched and then blew out. The plane skidded down the runway on its main gear and its nose, scraping along the concrete with a horrifying shriek of metal. It careened past shocked onlookers, narrowly missing people and vehicles. Finally, with its nose collapsed and resting on the ground, the giant glider slid to a stop, just feet from the end of the repurposed runway. Inside the cabin, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a wave of applause and relief. Despite the terrifying landing, no one was killed. There were only a few minor injuries during the emergency evacuation. The crew had performed a miracle. They had successfully glided a Boeing 767 for nearly 20 minutes and landed it on a racetrack with no engines and no serious casualties. It was an impossible feat. The aircraft itself, nicknamed the Gimli Glider, was repaired and flew for Air Canada for another 25 years. The investigation that followed pinpointed the metric conversion error as the root cause. It led to sweeping changes in fueling procedures and training, not just at Air Canada, but across the entire aviation industry. Captain Pearson and First Officer Quintel were initially disciplined, but were later hailed as heroes. Their incredible skill, calm professionalism, quick thinking in the face of an unprecedented crisis saved everyone on board. The story of the Gimli Glider remains one of the most celebrated and studied events in aviation, a powerful reminder that even in our high-tech world, the human element, the skill, courage, and ingenuity of the pilots in the cockpit is what truly matters most. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. If you found this story as amazing as I do, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's most fascinating stories. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think of this miraculous flight. Till next time, fly safe.